The battlefield was silent now. The smoke of burning machines still rose in the distance. Broken weapons and shattered ships covered the ground. The war between mercenaries and soldiers had ended, but only in death and ruin. Among the wreckage walked a man, a scavenger, a human. His name was Daniel, and he searched for metal, wires, or anything that could be sold. The galaxy never cared for humans, and Daniel survived only by finding scraps from other people's wars. He carried a small bag, his boots sinking into ash and sand. Everywhere around him lay helmets cracked in two, alien rifles without charge, and engines that would never fly again. But then he saw something strange. Half buried under twisted steel was a black shape, smooth and sharp. He bent down and brushed the dirt away. It was armor, heavy and shining even under the dust. The design was alien, powerful, and filled with strange, glowing lines. Daniel's heart raced, because this was not normal scrap. This was mercenary armor, the kind feared across the stars. He looked around quickly, making sure no one was watching. The battlefield was empty, only the wind whispering through broken metal. Slowly, Daniel pulled the armor free, piece by piece. The chest plate was wide, the helmet narrow and sharp, the gauntlets heavy with hidden weapons. Even broken, it looked alive. When he touched it, he felt a faint vibration like a heartbeat. Daniel hesitated, but greed and curiosity pushed him forward. "This could make me rich," he whispered to himself. He imagined selling it to smugglers or collectors. But another thought crept into his mind. What if he wore it? What if this armor could make him more than just a scavenger? Hands shaking, Daniel lifted the chest plate and strapped it on. The metal was cold at first, but then it grew warm, almost breathing against his skin. Energy moved through the armor, lines of light crawling across the plates. The gauntlets locked into place with a hiss, the helmet sealed around his head. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt strong, stronger than any man, stronger than any machine he had ever touched. The armor whispered in his mind, faint words he could not understand, but it felt like power, ancient and endless. He raised his arm and a blade of light shot out, humming with deadly force. Daniel gasped, his breath echoing inside the helmet. He laughed, nervous but excited. He had taken the armor of a mercenary, and now it belonged to him. Or so he thought. The ground shifted behind him, metal scraping on stone. Daniel froze, the hair on his neck standing up. A deep voice growled through the smoke. "Put it back," the voice said, slow and full of pain. "Put it back, or you're next." Daniel turned slowly, his heart pounding. There, crawling out from the shadow of a broken ship, was the mercenary. Tall, armored, but wounded, one arm missing, his body broken but not dead. His single eye burned with rage as he dragged himself closer. The armor Daniel wore glowed brighter, pulsing as if it recognized its true master. The mercenary bared his teeth, sharp and bloody. "That is mine," he said, pointing with a trembling claw. "You do not understand what you have taken." Daniel stepped back, his legs shaking. The armor felt heavy now, like it was waiting for him to decide. He wanted to run, but his pride stopped him. For the first time, he was not the weak human hiding in the shadows. He was standing tall, facing something far stronger. The mercenary's voice dropped into a growl. "Take it off, scavenger, before it kills you." Daniel clenched his fists, the gauntlets glowing with light. "No," he whispered inside the helmet. "I found it, and I'm keeping it." The mercenary's eye narrowed, fury burning in his face. "Then you have chosen death," he said, rising to his full height. Daniel swallowed hard, the weight of his choice pressing on his chest. The armor hummed louder, like it was alive, like it was choosing too. The battlefield around them was silent, waiting. Two figures stood among the ruins, one human, one alien, both broken in their own ways, both unwilling to yield. The scrap heap had given Daniel more than metal. It had given him power, but also a new enemy. And in that moment, he understood one truth. This was not the end of his scavenging. This was the beginning of his war. The mercenary rose slowly from the broken ground. His armor was cracked, his blood dark and thick, dripping into the ash. Yet his presence was heavy, like a storm that refused to die. Daniel's hands trembled inside the gauntlets, but he did not step back. The armor on his body was alive now, its glow pulsing with his heartbeat. It was as if the suit itself was watching the mercenary, judging him. The alien's voice was harsh, filled with rage and pain. "You cannot keep what was never yours," he said, each word grinding like metal. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to stay firm. "I found it," he said, his voice shaking but stubborn. "It's mine now." The mercenary's single eye blazed with fury. "You are the armor, but you do not control it," he growled. "That suit answers only to strength, only to will." Daniel felt the weight of those words. The armor shifted on his shoulders, almost like it agreed. For a moment, he wondered if it might turn against him. But then the gauntlets tightened around his arms, and power rushed through his veins. The mercenary took a step forward, his claws dragging on the ground. His breath was ragged, but his aura still carried death. "You are a scavenger, a parasite," he hissed. "You think wearing my second skin makes you a warrior, but the suit knows its true master." Daniel's fear was real, but so was the spark of defiance inside him. He had lived his whole life being less, being ignored, being weak. But here, in this broken field of war, he had a chance to be more. The mercenary lunged forward, his broken body moving with brutal speed. Daniel raised his arm instinctively, and the armor responded. A shield of light burst into existence, the alien's claws striking it with a flash of sparks. The impact shook Daniel to his core, his legs nearly giving out, but the shield held, and the armor hummed louder. The mercenary staggered back, snarling. "So the suit listens to you," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "But that will not save you." He spread his remaining arm wide, and the fragments of his own shattered armor lit up with hidden energy. Pieces of metal floated in the air around him, pulled by invisible force. Daniel's eyes widened. The mercenary was calling on the remains of his bond with the armor. The air trembled as shards of metal shot forward like knives. Daniel moved without thinking, the armor guiding his body. He leapt aside, rolled through the ash, and raised his gauntlet. A beam of light fired from his hand, slicing through the storm of steel. Shards exploded, the battlefield ringing with sound. The mercenary's eye burned brighter. "You resist," he growled. "Good. I prefer prey that fights before it dies." Daniel felt exhaustion already, his human body straining against the power. The armor fed him strength, but demanded willpower in return. Every second felt like a battle, not just against the mercenary, but against himself. The mercenary advanced again, his movements brutal and relentless. Daniel blocked, dodged, countered, his mind racing. He could not match the alien's experience, but the armor seemed to guide him. It whispered in strange echoes, showing flashes of battle. The memory of old fights burned into the metal itself. Daniel swung a blade of light, striking the mercenary's chest. The alien roared in pain, but did not fall. Instead, he laughed a deep, cruel sound. "The suit favors you," he said, coughing blood, "but you do not yet understand its price." Daniel steadied himself, sweat dripping inside the helmet. "What price?" he asked, his voice low. The mercenary's smile was sharp and broken. "It is bound to battle," he answered. "It will feed you. It will protect you, but only if you fight, and only if you win." The words chilled Daniel, because deep inside he knew they were true. The armor did not belong to him. Not fully. It belonged to war. The battlefield around them seemed to shrink, as if only two beings remained in the universe. A human who refused to yield, and an alien who refused to die. Daniel gripped the gauntlets tighter, the hum of energy filling his bones. The mercenary raised his arm once more, power gathering in his broken body. The fight was far from over. It was only beginning. The mercenary moved first, his broken body surging forward with impossible strength. Daniel barely had time to raise his arm, the armor answering with another shield of light. The impact was like thunder, the alien's claws scraping across the glowing barrier, sparks flying into the dark sky. Daniel stumbled back, his boots dragging through the ash. His heart pounded like a drum, his breath heavy inside the helmet. The mercenary did not relent, striking again and again, each blow shaking Daniel's bones. "You are nothing," the alien growled, his voice low and savage. "You hide behind the suit, but without it you are prey." Daniel clenched his jaw, anger burning through his fear. "I may be prey," he said, his voice echoing through the armor. "But even prey learns how to fight." He dropped the shield and swung his arm, a blade of light flashing into existence. The mercenary twisted aside, but not fast enough. The blade tore across his shoulder, burning through flesh and armor alike. The alien roared, the sound rolling across the battlefield. His single eye glowed with fury. Daniel's hands shook, the weapon humming as if alive. The armor seemed to push him forward, guiding his steps. For a moment, he felt like a warrior, not a scavenger. The mercenary attacked again, faster this time. Daniel blocked, their weapons clashing, sparks and light exploding in the air. The ground shook beneath their struggle. Daniel gritted his teeth, every strike pushing him to his limits. The alien was stronger, faster, and far more experienced. But Daniel had something the mercenary did not expect: human stubbornness. Even when his arms screamed in pain, he refused to let go. Even when his legs buckled, he forced them to move. The mercenary snarled, pressing harder. "You cannot win," he hissed. "The armor may listen to you, but you are still human, fragile and weak." Daniel's voice cracked, but his eyes burned with fire. "Maybe I am weak," he said, "but weakness taught me to survive." He twisted suddenly, letting the alien strike miss by inches. Then he drove his blade upward, slashing across the mercenary's side. The alien staggered, his blood spilling black and thick. Daniel's chest heaved, his body screaming for rest. But the armor pulsed with energy, refusing to let him stop. The mercenary steadied himself, his breath ragged, but his glare sharp as ever. "Impressive," he admitted with a bitter snarl. "The suit is feeding on your will, making you faster, stronger, more dangerous." Daniel's hands tightened around the glowing weapon. "Then maybe it chose me," he said. The mercenary's laugh was hollow, filled with anger and sorrow. "No, human, the suit does not choose, it uses, it binds, it consumes." His words struck Daniel like cold iron. But there was no time to think. The alien lunged again, his movements savage and desperate. Daniel met him head-on, their blades clashing, light and shadow colliding in the ruins. The battlefield echoed with the sound of their war. Daniel's mind raced, searching for an opening. The armor whispered again, flashes of battles long past filling his vision. He saw warriors he did not know, aliens who had worn the armor before him, each one fighting, bleeding, dying. The armor carried their memories, their rage, their victories and failures. Daniel gasped, nearly overwhelmed. The mercenary struck him hard, knocking him back into a pile of wreckage. Pain lanced through his ribs, his breath caught. For a moment, he thought he would not rise. But the armor pulsed, dragging him back to his feet. Daniel spat blood, his eyes locked on the mercenary. "I won't stop," he whispered. The alien sneered, raising his claw for another strike. "Then I will tear the fight from your bones," he promised. They clashed again, harder, faster, the world around them forgotten. Daniel's movements grew sharper, his strikes more precise. The mercenary realized with grim fury that the human was adapting. He was learning. Every second, Daniel became more dangerous. The alien roared in frustration, smashing his claw against Daniel's shield. "You are nothing but a thief," he shouted. "You steal my armor, my power, my honor." Daniel pushed back, their faces inches apart. "Then take it back," he growled. The mercenaries' eye widened with rage. Their blades locked, energy crackling between them, neither willing to give ground. The duel had truly begun, and only one of them would walk away. The clash echoed through the broken battlefield. Daniel's arms ached, his chest burned, but the armor refused to let him fall. Every time he staggered, the suit pulsed with light, forcing his body to rise again. The mercenary slashed with savage fury, his single eye blazing with hatred. "You are not worthy," the alien growled, his voice dripping with venom. "The armor belongs to me. It always has." Daniel blocked another strike, sparks flashing. "It listens to me," he shouted back. "Maybe it doesn't belong to you anymore." The words only fueled the alien's rage. He struck harder, his claws hammering against Daniel's shield. The ground cracked beneath their feet, energy shaking the ruins. Yet Daniel felt something strange. The armor was no longer just reacting, it was guiding him. His movements became sharper, his steps quicker, as though the suit was teaching him. He could almost hear voices inside the helmet, whispers of warriors long gone. They were not human, but their strength flowed into him. The mercenary saw it too, and for the first time, doubt flickered in his eye. "The bond," he muttered, his voice low. "The suit, it is binding with you." Daniel tightened his grip on the glowing blade. "What does that mean?" he demanded. The mercenary's laugh was bitter and hollow. "It means you are doomed," he spat. "The armor does not serve. It consumes. It feeds on your will until nothing is left." Daniel hesitated, but the armor pulsed again, warmth spreading through his body. It did not feel like death. It felt alive, like a heartbeat matching his own. The alien lunged, his broken body fueled by fury. Daniel met him head-on, their blades colliding in a storm of sparks. But this time, Daniel pushed back with more force than before. The mercenary's claw trembled against his blade. The alien snarled, trying to overpower him, but Daniel held firm. The armor glowed brighter, responding to his determination. It no longer felt borrowed, it felt like his. The mercenary roared, slamming his weight forward. "You think it chose you," he bellowed. "You are only a vessel, a tool, like the rest of us." Daniel's voice cracked, but remained steady. "Then maybe I'll be the first to change that." He twisted, driving his blade across the alien's chest. The strike cut deep, the mercenary stumbling back, his breath ragged. His single eye burned with fury and disbelief. The armor hummed louder, its energy surging through Daniel like fire. Visions flashed before his eyes again. Warriors of different worlds, wearing the same suit, fighting endless battles. Some victorious, some broken, all consumed by war. Daniel gasped, gripping his head as the memories threatened to drown him. The mercenary saw his weakness and charged. But the armor steadied Daniel, pulling his body upright. His blade rose on instinct, meeting the alien strike. The clash sent a shock wave through the ruins, dust rising into the air. Daniel's legs nearly gave out, but he refused to fall. The bond between him and the armor tightened. It was no longer just protecting him, it was inside him, part of him. The mercenary staggered, blood spilling, his voice breaking. "No, no. It should not be possible," he rasped. "A human cannot hold it this long." Daniel's chest heaved, his voice raw. "Maybe it's not about strength," he said. "Maybe it's about refusing to give up." The alien roared, throwing himself forward in a final desperate strike. Daniel met him with all the force the armor could give. Their weapons clashed, energy screaming in the air. The ground cracked, the sky lit with sparks. Daniel's knees buckled, but he held on. The armor roared with him, their bond unbreakable. With a final surge, Daniel shoved the mercenary back. The alien fell to one knee, his body trembling. His eye glared up, filled with hate, but also fear. "You will regret this bond," he hissed. "It will destroy you in the end." Daniel stood over him, his blade glowing, his chest heaving. "Maybe," he whispered, "but right now it's keeping me alive." The armor pulsed in agreement, light spreading across his body like fire. For the first time, Daniel felt like it was not just a suit. It was part of him, and he was part of it. The bond was sealed. The war was only beginning. The battlefield lay in ruins, dust and fire swirling around the two figures. Daniel stood tall in the armor, his chest heaving, his blade glowing with energy. The mercenary knelt before him, blood dripping, his body broken, yet his spirit unyielding. For a moment, it seemed as if the fight was done, but the alien's single eye narrowed, burning with a new and dangerous light. "You think you have won," the mercenary hissed, his voice rough and sharp. "You think the bond makes you master, but you know nothing of this suit's true power." Daniel steadied his breathing, his arms heavy, his body screaming for rest. Yet the armor kept him upright, its hum steady, pulsing like a second heart. "What else could you possibly do?" Daniel said, trying to hide the fear in his voice. "You can barely stand." The mercenary's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You underestimate me, human," he rasped. This armor was not just protection. It was a weapon, a living forge of war. Daniel's pulse quickened, the suit tightening around him as if bracing for something. The alien spread his clawed hand, and shards of his broken armor began to rise from the ground. Fragments of black steel hovered in the air, glowing with ancient energy. They spun faster and faster, forming a storm of blades around him. Daniel's eyes widened inside the helmet. The mercenary roared, his broken body shaking with fury. "I may be dying, but I will not die alone," he shouted. "If I cannot reclaim the armor, then I will bury both of us here." The shard shot forward, sharp and deadly. Daniel raised his shield instinctively, light bursting from his gauntlet. The storm of blades slammed against it, sparks exploding in every direction. The force rattled his bones, nearly breaking his stance. He pushed back with every ounce of strength he had. But the mercenary's will was monstrous, a tide of rage and vengeance. The alien dragged himself upright, his chest heaving, blood pouring from his wounds. He staggered, but stood, commanding the metal storm like a general at war. Daniel gritted his teeth, his arms trembling under the endless barrage. The armor whispered in his mind again, visions flashing before his eyes. He saw other warriors, those who had faced the same storm, some falling, some rising, each one leaving their will imprinted into the armor. The suit urged him not to fear, but to embrace the fight. Daniel dropped the shield suddenly, and the storm rushed toward him. At the last moment, his blade of light slashed wide, cutting through the shards. The air filled with explosions of sparks and shattered steel. The mercenary's eye widened in fury. "You dare defy me," he roared, summoning even more shards into the air. His body shook violently, blood dripping faster, but his rage gave him strength. Daniel charged forward, pushing through the storm, his armor flaring brighter than ever. Each shard that struck him was deflected, sparks flashing against the glowing plates. He roared, his voice raw and human. The mercenary staggered, but unleashed his last weapon. From his chest, a core of burning energy cracked open. It pulsed with blinding light, a hidden core reactor meant for destruction. Daniel froze, realizing what the alien intended. He was going to trigger it, turning himself into a living bomb. The mercenary grinned through blood. "If I cannot live, then you will die with me," he whispered. Daniel's heart raced, the armor's hum rising to a scream. There was no choice left, no time to run. He lunged forward, slamming his blade deep into the alien's chest. The mercenary roared, clutching Daniel's arm, but it was too late. The reactor pulsed, glowing brighter. Daniel poured all his will into the armor, forcing it to react. The suit spread its energy outward, creating a barrier of pure light. The explosion erupted, fire and steel ripping across the battlefield. The shockwave tore through the ruins, scattering wreckage for miles. Inside the storm, Daniel stood his ground, his body nearly broken. The armor screamed with him, the barrier holding as the explosion consumed everything. When the fire faded, silence returned. Daniel collapsed to one knee, the armor cracked and smoking. The mercenary lay broken before him, his body unmoving, his eye finally dark. His last gambit had failed, but his words echoed in Daniel's mind like a curse. The armor will consume you. Daniel's chest heaved, his mind torn between victory and dread. He had survived the storm, but the price of the bond was still unknown. And deep within the armor, he felt something stir, as if the suit itself was whispering, waiting, hungering. The battlefield was silent after the explosion. The smoke drifted across shattered metal, burned earth, and broken machines. Daniel knelt on one knee, his body trembling inside the cracked armor. Every breath felt heavy, his ribs ached, and his muscles screamed. The armor was damaged, glowing faintly, its hum weaker, but still alive. Daniel forced himself to rise, staggering to his feet. His vision blurred, but he refused to collapse. Across from him, the mercenary's body lay broken. The alien's chest had been pierced, his reactor destroyed, his limbs twisted. For a moment, Daniel thought it was finally over. But then the mercenary's eye flickered open, glowing faintly with rage. He coughed blood, his voice a broken growl. "You still live," he rasped. Daniel tightened his fists, raising his blade though his arms shook. "Yeah," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm not done yet." The mercenary tried to push himself up, his body failing, his claw scraping the dirt. He laughed weakly, the sound hollow and bitter. "You are stubborn, like a true warrior," he whispered. "But this is not your victory, not yet." Daniel's heart pounded, the armor pulsing with his fear and determination. The alien's body glowed faintly, as if some last reserve of energy stirred inside him. Daniel staggered closer, blade ready. "Stay down," he warned, his voice raw. But the mercenary bared his teeth in a bloody grin. "You think you have killed me," he said. "You think the armor has accepted you. But it has only begun." Daniel shook his head, sweat stinging his eyes. "I don't care what it wants," he said. "I'll use it, not the other way around." The mercenary's eye narrowed, his breath ragged. "Foolish human, the armor uses you. It always does." He coughed again, blood spilling, yet his claw rose one last time. A sudden burst of energy crackled around his body. Daniel braced, his blade ready, but his knees nearly gave out. The mercenary launched forward in a final desperate strike. Daniel roared, swinging his blade of light. The two forces collided, sparks and fire lighting the ruined field. Daniel felt the impact tear through his arms, nearly ripping the blade from his grip. But he pushed harder, his will screaming louder than his pain. The armor glowed, surging with his determination. The mercenary's strength faltered, his broken body unable to sustain the attack. With one final push, Daniel drove the blade straight through the alien's chest. The mercenary's eye widened in shock, his body jerking. A guttural cry escaped his throat, echoing across the ruins. Then silence. The alien collapsed, his body still, his eye fading into darkness. Daniel staggered, falling to one knee again, his chest heaving. He could barely breathe, but he was still alive. The armor flickered with dim light, its hum steady once more. It had survived with him, and he had survived with it. Daniel stared at the fallen mercenary. Even in death, the alien looked fierce, a warrior to the end. Daniel whispered softly, "You fought harder than anyone I've ever seen." He stood slowly, though every step felt heavy. The battlefield stretched silent around him. The war, now only ashes and ghosts. For the first time, Daniel realized what he had become. Not just a scavenger, not just a survivor, but something greater. The armor had chosen to keep him alive, but at a cost he did not yet understand. Deep inside, he felt it, a presence stirring within the suit. It was not just metal, not just weapon, but something alive, something watching him, whispering faintly, waiting for more. Daniel clenched his fists, the blade fading into sparks. He knew this was not the end. The mercenary's last words echoed in his mind. "The armor uses you. Daniel stared at the horizon, the smoke rising into the dark sky. His body was broken, his mind shaken, but he was still standing. He had won, but it was a victory carved at the very edge of death. And somewhere deep within, he knew this was only the beginning. The battlefield lay in silence. Only the distant crackle of burning wreckage broke the stillness. Daniel stood among the ruins, his body bruised, his armor cracked but still glowing faintly. The mercenary's body lay motionless at his feet, finally defeated. Daniel's chest heaved with each breath, pain shooting through his ribs, but he refused to collapse. The armor hummed softly, like it was alive, like it was pleased. Daniel looked down at his hands, the gauntlets glowing faintly, the metal fused to his skin. He had survived, but he was no longer the same scavenger who walked into this graveyard. He had entered as a man searching for scraps, and he had emerged as something more. The voices inside the armor whispered again, faint and distant. They were not words he understood, but they carried meaning, strength, warning. He touched the helmet, his mind echoing with fragments of battles long past. Warriors of different worlds had worn this same armor, each bound by its will, each consumed by its hunger. And now he was the next in line. Daniel clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "No," he whispered, his voice steady. "I'm not going to be a slave to this thing." The armor pulsed, almost as if it was laughing, almost as if it was testing him. He felt both fear and power running through his veins. The battle with the mercenary had proved one thing. The suit responded not to bloodline, not to heritage, but to will, and his will had kept him alive. Daniel turned, staring at the ruined battlefield. Smoke rose into the sky, carrying the smell of metal, fire, and death. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, others would learn what had happened here. The mercenary had not been alone. There would be more warriors who wanted the armor, more enemies who would not accept a human claiming it. Daniel took a shaky step forward, then another, his body weak, but his spirit hard. He could feel the weight of destiny pressing against his shoulders. He was not ready for it, but he had no choice. The armor whispered again, this time clearer. "Master, a war is coming." Daniel froze, his eyes narrowing inside the helmet. The word master sent a shiver through him. He was not sure if the suit meant it, or if it was mocking him. But either way, the meaning was clear. The fight with the mercenary was only the beginning. Daniel raised his head, staring at the horizon. He was a human, fragile and small in a galaxy filled with monsters. But he had stood against one of the deadliest mercenaries and survived. And now he wore the armor of legends. He clenched his fists tighter, feeling the energy hum within him. He knew the path ahead would be filled with enemies, with blood and betrayal. But he also knew he would never go back to being a scavenger. Not anymore. The galaxy would learn his name. They would learn that a human could rise from the ashes of battle. They would learn that he was not prey, not fragile, not weak. He had taken the armor, and he would keep it, even if it meant fighting the entire universe. Daniel stood tall among the wreckage, the glow of the armor casting light across the ruins. The whispers grew stronger, promising both power and destruction. He did not know if the armor was his ally or his curse, but he would decide his fate, not it. The wind carried the smoke into the sky, the battlefield fading in his silence. Daniel turned his back on the mercenary's corpse. One battle was over, but a greater war had already begun. And in that war, humanity would not be forgotten. The scavenger was gone. The warrior had risen. The human had claimed his place, and the galaxy would never be the same.